Canada-U.S. relations over the last 4 years have been unpredictable at best, frosty at times, and a clear departure from what both nations had enjoyed until 2016. Now there's a new leader in the White House with a very full plate of issues to deal with. What will the Canada-U.S. relationship look like now? Hello and welcome to Unpublished TV. I'm Ed Hand. We're coming to you from a safe location, a remote location, practicing physical distancing to enhance safety. We share the longest undefended border in the world, although it remains closed to non-essential travel. Our economies are tightly linked. We share many of the same interests and issues. With Joe Biden now in the White House, there appears to be more room for collaboration on key files. Our unpublished.vote question asked which issue should be the top discussion for Canada and the new U.S. administration. The options were China, Buy American, climate change, the pandemic, reopening the border, none of the above and unsure. By far, reopening the border was top at 87.6%, and the pandemic coming in at second at just 5%. However you're watching and listening to our show, whether through our social media channels on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, or our podcast channels, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and more, I'd like to remind you, you can still cast your vote on this topic at unpublished.vote and then email your MP to tell them why. Now, joining us to discuss on Unpublished TV, Bill Anderson is the director of the Cross-Border Institute at the University of Windsor. Fen Hampson is the Chancellor's Professor and Professor of International Affairs at Carleton University. Eric Miller is the president of the Rideau Potomac Strategy Group, and Mark High is president of the Canada-U.S. Business Association. And gentlemen, I thank you all for joining us, and we'll talk about the question first off, what should be the top issue? Obviously, 87.6% of our viewers and listeners say it should be reopening the border. Let's go around the horn. Eric, is that you think that's the top priority right now?
I think that's a crucial priority. I think that fundamentally you're seeing big parts of the Canada-U.S. economy, particularly related to trade and services, being torn apart by the pandemic. But mind you, the answer is not simply to reopen the border, it's to reopen the border safely. Yep. Because Canadians also say they do not want people with COVID in its many varietals now coming into Canada. And so you need testing. You need to be able to recognize vaccines through health passports, and you need ways to help local cross-border communities like the ones where Mark and Bill live to be able to deal with their own local realities as well.
Fen, what do you think? Do you think that's the number one border or number one discussion between Canada and the U.S.?
Well, there's certainly an urgency there that I think is affecting all Canadians who do business on the other side of the border, and those Canadians who are stuck in Florida and other points southwards who want to come home. But I think, the urgency, as Eric just said, it's not going to happen anytime soon until the pandemic is under control. And there are other issues, that I think are just as important. Where's the Biden administration going in terms of its Buy American policies, which could really affect Canadians? The protectionist impulse that we saw under Trump is probably only going to get worse, not better. That's going to be, I think, a big issue in discussions going forward. We got kneecapped with the executive order that was signed by President Biden on his first day of office, canceling the Keystone Pipeline. I don't think the pipeline's going anywhere, but it's an indication of just how low Canada is in the sights and the affections of the new administration, notwithstanding the fact that there was a polite little telephone call between the president and the prime minister, last Friday, I guess it was, or 2 weeks ago, Friday, 3 weeks ago, Friday, losing track of time with COVID. But
Yeah, I think we all are. Bill, what do you think? Reopening the border top of mind with our listeners?
Yeah, I was a little surprised to see that. I mean, I agree with the idea that it is a very important thing, and I was surprised to see. I looked at your survey before we came on here, and I was quite surprised to see that big number. Because at the same time, if you had surveys of the Canadian people in general, like nano surveys that have been done recently, there's a very strong feeling against reopening the border. So the way, I think the issue is that the border is not, actually the border isn't closed. There's trucks going back and forth across the border. We look at the data. If you look at the freight flows, they're really about the same now as they were last year. And that's been the case now for several months. I think Eric made a good point about trade and services is completely undermined by the situation we have now. And also, we talk a lot to people that are in sort of advanced manufacturing, that are in sort of mold makers, people in automation and whatnot. And you have to remember that Canada doesn't trade with the United States. Canadian companies trade with American companies, and they have to get together. And, you know, you can't sell somebody a big piece of capital equipment on the basis of saying, well, look at my website and, you know, click where you want it. You have to have site visits. You have to have negotiations and whatnot. That's what's not happening. And what we're hearing from people in some of those industries are that they're losing contracts every week. So in a sense, we've got this cross-border industrial complex with all these people on opposite sides of the border that have been mixing carefully through organizations like Mark High's organization. They've been mixing very well over the years. And now we've got almost a year when they aren't able to get in the same room. And I think that in the long run, some serious damage is going to be done to Canada-U.S. trade.
And Mark, just to finish up on our poll question about reopening the border being the number one issue with our viewers and listeners, I imagine that's probably the number one issue with your organization as well.
Well, that's true. I'm in Detroit. I look out my window. I see Windsor right across the river here. So, yeah, we're definitely very interested and involved with trying to get the border reopened. We've joined with the NASCO group out of Texas. About 30 organizations signed a letter that got sent to a dozen people in each of the three countries about a month ago. We're seeing reaction and I think effects from that. The executive order that came out last week or 2 weeks ago from the president talked about getting recommendations on reopening the border. And then just this week, the Northern Border Coalition group of representatives, U.S. Congress, has sent a letter with half a dozen suggestions for getting this reopened again to normal traffic. So we think there's some real momentum here that hope we'll see some progress into the spring.
Fen, when it comes to relations between countries, tone. How important is the tone when it comes to negotiating with another country? And do you think it will improve between Canada and the U.S.?
Well, I think tone is important, and I think we could probably all agree that the tone was pretty brutal during the previous administration of Donald Trump. But he also did some things that were, you know, in Canada's interest when he reversed President Obama's cancellation of Keystone. But I think, you know, the bigger question is ultimately, you know, what is the relationship between the two leaders? How effective are we at getting our message across to the American Congress? And, you know, we've seen periods in the history of relations where a very strong personal relationship between the Canadian Prime Minister and the American President, and I'm thinking obviously of the relationship between Brian Mulroney, first with Ronald Reagan and then with George Herbert Walker Bush. You know, that very close relationship played huge dividends when it came to negotiating not just the Canada-U.S. free trade agreement, but subsequent to that, the negotiation of NAFTA. And what it gives you is access to the White House, and you know, others notice if you've got you know, an open door to the Oval Office. I think there's no question that Prime Minister Trudeau does have a good relationship with Joe Biden, but you know, is it really one where you know, Biden is going to pick up the phone, ask Trudeau what he thinks about something before he chooses to act? We haven't seen a whole lot of evidence yet, but that's still early days.
Eric, the Keystone XL pipeline, the plug's been pulled on that. What do you see that impacting relations, or how that will impact relations?
Yeah, so initially, there was certainly an outcry of concern in Canada about the impact on the relationship. And in the United States, you're still seeing this reverberate. Thousands of good paying industrial jobs were essentially lost overnight by the decision to cancel the Keystone XL pipeline. But without that presidential permit, it's very difficult for the United States or for TC Energy to go forward with the United States. Now, the key thing that Alberta is going to have to wrestle with is there's another pipeline, namely Line 5, which goes in through northern Michigan and comes back into Canada through Sarnia, that supplies a huge proportion of Western Canadian oil to southern Ontario. And Governor Whitmer in Michigan has ordered that pipeline closed by May. And so, in addition to Alberta dealing with the market access issues that it is facing with respect to Keystone XL, getting a solution on Line 5 is also crucially important. And so one has to be judicious about how one uses one's political capital in this. There may be an investor state dispute settlement case that's brought under the legacy NAFTA rules as per the CUSMA or USMCA rules. But Line 5 is also really important to Alberta. And all of this, of course, ironically makes the Trudeau government's decision to buy the Trans Mountain pipeline all the more important, because that looks like it's going to be the key new access point to world markets for Alberta oil in the years ahead.
Bill, our number one export is oil, and at least oil to the U.S. How are Canadians going to react to the cancellation? We know how Alberta's going to react, but, it's a big country.
Well, I think Canadians, feel like if you really want to save the planet, why don't you do something about oil production in the United States? And so, it's in a way, it's doing something to bottle up some petroleum where, you have a very rapidly growing petroleum industry in the United States right now. And I think, however, I don't think anybody should be surprised by this. I would have been very surprised if it didn't come out this way. I think there's going to be a lot of, this is an Obama thing that Trump canceled, and now you have Biden is going to cancel that. But I would make the point that, that it may be the largest single element in trade between the United States and Canada. But altogether, a much bigger part of the United States and Canada trade is actually manufacturing. And I think that for that reason, we should be worried about the Buy American thing too. And we should be worried about keeping the border open and keeping supply chains functioning.
Well, that was a perfect transition, Bill. Mark, I want to ask you about the Buy American policy. Is this going to become an irritant for the two? Or like last time around when something was coming around, it seemed the provinces found a way around it?
Well, yeah, we've been dealing with Buy America for a long time here. It's not just a federal program. There are Buy America policies in place at states and in counties, municipalities across the U.S. But I think if you look at the way they've been interpreted, they generally find a way to allow reciprocal trade with people that do the same the other way. And because so many things that come from Canada, half of them have U.S. parts in them. So I think it's a pretty easy sale to allow Canadian exemptions for most of those policies. I think that's been the past history. I think that's what will happen in the future.
Now, Fen, you had brought up at the beginning about your concerns about protectionist actions, and you got a feeling that there's going to be more?
Well, I think, there's protectionism at the federal level in terms of federal procurement laws. There's also protectionism and mischief at the state level, as Eric just mentioned, in terms of, regulation of pipelines. I think, the fact that the Biden administration is has a rather sort of fuzzy approach to this. They're introducing a new sort of value added requirement in terms of how you assess the new provisions that they want to bring in. And so, I think, that's obviously going to be done at the agency level. And, there's a lot of opportunity for, Canada to lobby for exceptions. I think what may be most troubling is the fact that Biden is creating a Buy American czar who's going to sit in the White House. In the past, exemptions, were made, at the federal agency level. Now it's all going to be centralized in the White House. That raises the politicization of this issue to a very high level. He says, he wants $400 billion more in I should say American procurement of goods, and that that's going to be a double-edged sword. I mean, on the one hand, you can go to the White House and say we want that exemption, but at the same time, it's kind of one-stop shopping. But at the same time, it's going to be very, very political. And I think, we're talking about a $2 trillion new infrastructure program. This is much bigger than anything we've seen before in terms of federal expenditures. And so, there's potentially huge business there for Canada, whether it's our aluminum producers, our steel producers, where there's still lots of restrictions in place, but they can't produce it in the United States. They're still going to have to buy it from us. And there, I think, we're really going to have to play offense. And we're going to have to say to the Americans, look, you can pay a lot more for this stuff, but your dollars are going to go a lot further if you buy it from us because we're cheaper. We're cheaper producers. And we're going to have to show them, as we did during the USMCA negotiations, that you go this route, ultimately it's going to hurt you more than it hurts us. And we're going to have to show them the hard numbers, because this is an administration that does believe, I think, that facts matter.
Bill, I want to talk to you about, you had mentioned something earlier, and it was regarding our poll. We mentioned the number one was reopening the border. Number two is the pandemic. Number three was climate change. And I wonder, obviously the Keystone XL pipeline has been canceled, but could the U.S. even support and approve Keystone XL and be a leader in climate change, as both Biden and Trudeau say they are?
Well, I think, I think the issue is mostly about, Alberta having all of this oil locked up. And I do think that the forces in the United States that are influencing the president now feel strongly that this oil should be locked up. And so it's a difficult question. I mean, you can take the environmentalist view, and it's a correct view, I suppose, that if this oil never gets out of the ground because it's a higher carbon oil, that's going to be good for the environment. But I think when you're looking at it from the Canadian perspective, and particularly the Alberta perspective, it's not just a question of sort of slowing down the development of these oil resources. It's really a question of cutting them off by cutting off access to global markets. I will say, however, one thing in the United States. I mean, a lot of people, if you make this case to them, they'll say, "Come on, you guys can't build a pipeline yourselves, and so why are you giving us a hard time about our pipeline?" But nevertheless, I do think it's more of it's an issue that basically says, are you going to lock up that oil in Alberta forever? And that's really what the problem is here.
All right. Now, Mark, what opportunities do you foresee, at least in your area, business-wise, with this new relationship between Canada and the U.S.?
Well, I think, as you suggested, it thaws the relationship. I think we can start to work together on various things. I mean, we've been talking about Buy America. Really, the target there is China, isn't it? And so I think the new administration is going to be back trying to get a coalition together to approach that issue rather than alone with a group of like-minded folks. And so in that sense, I think the U.S. and Canada can can join together and move forward on that front. And that helps, I think, all of us.
Eric, the pandemic was the second highest concern or issue among our viewers and listeners. And with this new relationship, how do you expect the response to the pandemic to improve or not improve?
Well, certainly the Biden administration is finding out early on that supporting the production of large amounts of vaccines and getting them into the arms of people is a complex undertaking. And so the Trump administration had little in the way of discernible plans, but the states certainly did. And what was really lacking was federal leadership in helping to drive coordination. But the United States is a big country. And so getting people in different parts of the country to be able to have access to the vaccine is a complicated undertaking. Similarly, you look at the situation that one is facing now with export restrictions out of the European Union. There are certain locations in which these medications are being produced, and it should cause one to ask, well, does one need domestic manufacturing capability in the event of these sorts of crises? And it goes to the bigger question, I think, of what do we do about supply chain? So we've heard a lot during the Trump administration, and certainly since the pandemic, about need to shift supply chains out of China. What are we going to do about it? The one country that has actually acted decisively on this front is Japan, where they have directly subsidized Japanese companies to leave China in certain strategic areas. And so the discussion really is how does one deal with the situation? But currently, as we let markets work themselves out, there are certain production locations, many of which are in Europe, where these vaccines are being made. Yeah. And Canadians and Americans will get them when they get them. But looking ahead to ask the question of how do we ensure this doesn't happen again, a key part of that equation is what infrastructure does one need to have nationally in place to ensure that in an event of a crisis, you're not reliant on Belgium to get the vaccines you need.
Yeah, exactly. Not a lot of, well, not very much in Canada in terms of domestic production. That's for sure. Now, Bill, your institute, the Cross Border Institute, did an interesting study regarding the Gordie Howe Bridge, the new Gordie Howe Bridge, and the opportunities it's going to bring. What opportunities is this?
Well, I think we were focusing not so much on part of the study was looking at, what are the savings, what are the benefits nationwide in both the United States and Canada, because it really is it's a bridge. There's more trucks come across that bridge from Quebec than come across from Southwest Ontario. But we were interested in what can be some of the economic development possibilities in the area in Southwest Ontario and in Southeast Michigan. And really what you have here is one of the biggest flows of goods in trucks that exists anywhere in the world. And so how do you take advantage of that by offering some sort of services? And, you can't say, oh, we want the trucks to stop. If there isn't an economic rationale for the trucks to stop, they won't and they shouldn't. But are there services? Is there opportunity to use this as a point for development of logistics activities? And, this is something that, you have to approach very cautiously, because whenever you get the government in and saying, OK, that's a great idea, let's create some sort of a logistics hub, you end up, I'm not going to name names here, but there are a few white elephants around the landscape, including in Canada. You don't want to do that, but you want to be able to create the opportunities, given that you have, if it's for people, the logistics people, I always say that it's a natural cross dock. It's a place where trucks are coming in from all over the United States with goods for Canada, and then they come across the bridge, and then they need to be split up and sent off to other places in Canada. So there's lots of opportunities. And so what we've basically done is to make some recommendations in terms of how you might get some sort of a binational initiative for development in that industry. And basically the idea is that, the benefit is very widespread, but how do you take advantage of this amazing resource? I think of it as a rolling market, a huge rolling market And how do you take advantage of that? So the study is there. It's on our website. Anybody that'd like to see it, please download it and have a look.
Yeah, University of Windsor. Now, Fen, we've been talking an awful lot, obviously, just across the border here, but it's a big world. International relations is a key point here, and Canada and the U.S. do have issues with China. How do you expect them to work together, or will they work together to try and solve these concerns?
Well, I think there needs to be obviously a resolution of the two Michaels problem sooner rather than later, and to up the pressure on China to release those two individuals. There was lots of huffing and puffing by Donald Trump on the issue, but not much action, and that has been a real constraint. I think one thing we have to realize is, China's not going to go away. It too is locked into global value chains because it's a competitive place to make things. But we do need to, I think, obviously be strategic as we deal with China. For example, on climate change, Canada's not the culprit. Keystone's not the culprit. We all know that. The big emitters are China, India now, as it is undergoing rapid industrialization. And, China is still building a lot of coal-fired plants for electricity generation. It's one reason why Canada should be selling natural gas to China so that they can convert some of those power plants to a more carbon-friendly fuel. I think, when it comes to security, it's not just, Canada and the United States dealing with cybersecurity threats that come from China. It's other countries as well. The Biden administration has talked about, a D10 approach, democracies working more closely together. The British Prime Minister has also said that, and I think that's where we need to join hands. Biden sees himself as a big multilateralist. He wants to work more closely with the allies, and there I think we can take a lead. But we have to step up to the plate. We have to show some imagination. I mean, we have to recognize that for the next year, Biden's focus is going to be very much domestic. Getting the pandemic under control, getting the economy restarted. That's obviously a challenge for us. So, foreign policy is, unless there's a major international crisis, is not going to be the foremost priority of this administration.
Mm-hmm. Bill, do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I would agree. I leave it to the expert, and the international relations expert, but I think that the multilateralism is a complete change in terms of the new administration, and so things are going to look very different.
Mark, I want to talk to you about the new travel restrictions for Canadians and what kind of an impact that's going to have.
Well, as the token American here, although I do hear some Bostonian accent in Dr. Anderson's speech, but the restrictions on international flights coming in, people coming back into Canada, clearly is going to affect the snowbirds, as you mentioned, in Florida. But it's essential, and part of this whole reopening the border. We do have two systems now, one for flights and one for land borders. We've got to coordinate. That, and with the vaccines coming along, with the science now going to be listened to, I think, as I said, we're going to see some movement in that arena pretty quickly here.
And let's look maybe 2 years down the road. How do you see this relationship, Canada-U.S. relationship, looking 2 years down the road, Eric?
So 2 years down the road, I think the relationship will be one where many commentators will be expressing their disappointment that somehow we're not back in the world of 2016. things have fundamentally changed because the role of the United States in the world has fundamentally changed. And certainly seeing the rise of China, which Fen was talking about earlier, is something that is really fundamental. I've said for a while that I think Canada seriously needs a rethink on China, particularly some sort of an expert panel on China that will look at the relationship. Also, that same panel could look at the relationship with the United States and how the China relationship will impact where we are with the United States. And so I hope in 2 years that I'll be able to go to Detroit and to Windsor and see Bill and Mark on the same day. But
in the same place, maybe?
Yeah, maybe in the same place.
Happy hour.
Yeah, happy hour. So we'll, but we'll see where that's going. But there are no shortage of challenges which are out there. But fundamentally, I look at the coup in Myanmar, which is a country I've been to a couple of times. China is very much connected to what's going on there. They built an oil pipeline from the coast into China so that they don't have to send their tankers through the Straits of Malacca. And so lots of stuff is happening in Malaysia. And I hope the United States will become more focused and engaged on what's happening there, and that they will bring their allies with them. But there does need to be a willingness for everyone to think outside the box, because in this new world, the box is not the place where you're going to see prosperity and security being built.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining us. A great discussion on Canada-U.S. relations with a new president. Our guest this evening, Bill Anderson, director of the Cross-Border Institute at the University of Windsor. Fen Hampson's the Chancellor's Professor of International Affairs at Carleton University. Eric Miller is the president of the Rideau Potomac Strategy Group, and Mark High is the president of the Canada-U.S. Business Association. Coming up on the next Unpublished TV, why are doctors and nurses being muzzled by health administrators and politicians? Hope you can join us. Thanks for watching Unpublished TV. Stay safe. I'm Ed Hand.